I never imagined my own parents would calculate me out of their lives with a spreadsheet. Yet there I stood in our living room, watching my stepfather's finger tap against the printed columns of numbers. Mom hovered beside him, her eyes fixed on the cream-colored carpet, shoulders curved inward like a question mark. "Sienna," Brian's voice cut through the silence. "Sit down." My stomach nodded as I lowered myself onto the edge of the sofa. The springs creaked beneath me, unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Through the window, I could see the neighbor's sprinklers spinning, water droplets catching the afternoon sun. "We need to discuss some financial realities." Brian shuffled the papers with his thick fingers, the wedding band gleaming under the ceiling light. "Your mother and I have done the math." Math, as if I were an equation that needed solving. Mom's hand trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Still, she wouldn't look at me. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Brian cleared his throat, eyes scanning the numbers as if searching for courage in the columns. "We just can't afford 3 kids. The twins need more." The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. "What?" The question slipped out barely above a whisper. "Private preschool for 2 children isn't cheap." Brian continued, his tone flat, like he was discussing a cable bill. "Then there's the swimming lessons, the developmental therapy for Caleb's speech delay." I looked to Mom, waiting for her to jump in, to say this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, she nodded, a short, sharp movement. "It's for the best," she said, finally meeting my eyes. No tears, no hesitation, just practical acceptance. The blood drained from my face so quickly I felt lightheaded. "You're getting rid of me?" Brian's jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic. We've arranged for you to stay with your grandparents." "Arranged?" The word tasted bitter. "For how long?" A look passed between them, quick but unmistakable. This wasn't temporary. "They have that apartment above their garage," Mom said, her voice oddly light. "You always liked it there." I stared at her, this woman who had held me through childhood fevers, who had braided my hair for elementary school pictures, who now sat discussing my removal from the family as if rearranging furniture. "When?" The question scraped my throat. "This weekend would be best," Brian answered, folding the papers with decisive creases. "We've already discussed it with Ray and Dorothy." My grandparents knew before I did. The humiliation burned hot against my skin. I stood up, legs unsteady beneath me. "And if I say no?" Mom's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "You're 17, Sienna. This isn't a negotiation." 17. Old enough to discard, too young to refuse. I walked to my room in a fog, passing the twins' bedroom where 4-year-old Caleb and Lena played with building blocks on their matching blue rugs. Lena looked up, her face so much like Mom's, breaking into a smile. "Sienna, look, I made a castle." I forced my lips to curve upward. "That's beautiful." They didn't understand. How could they? They were just little kids who happened to cost more than I did. In my room, I pulled my duffel bags from under the bed and began filling them mechanically. Clothes, books, the photo album that ended when the twins were born. The calculus trophy no one had attended the ceremony to see me receive. Mom appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. "Don't forget your winter coat. It gets drafty in that apartment." As if the temperature was my biggest concern. "Does Dad know?" I asked, referring to my biological father who lived in Kentucky with his new family. "I left a message." She shrugged. "You know how he is." I did know. Unreliable, absent, but at least he'd never sat me down with a spreadsheet to explain why I wasn't worth keeping. The twins wandered in, eyes wide at the sight of my bags. "Are you going on a trip?" Caleb asked, his speech slightly slurred from the delay Brian had mentioned. "Something like that," I answered, unable to look at their innocent faces. Mom ushered them out. "Go play in your room. Sienna's busy." No explanation, no goodbye ritual, just busy. I zipped the duffels closed and slung them over my shoulders. The weight pulled against my muscles as I walked past my parents in the living room. No one offered to drive me. 2 miles wasn't far, Brian had mentioned earlier. Good exercise. At the door, I paused, waiting for something. Tears, regret, a change of heart. Your grandpa will be expecting you, Mom said simply. I stepped outside into the spring afternoon, the door clicking shut behind me. With each step down the driveway, the bags grew heavier, not from their contents, but from the knowledge they carried. I had been subtracted from the equation, calculated out of existence. And my own mother had checked the math. 3 days later, the school form fluttered from my backpack like a bird with broken wings, landing on Grandma Dorothy's polished hardwood floor. I stared at the yellow paper, my vision tunneling around the words, change of address, filled out in Mom's familiar handwriting. The date stamp in the corner read the 3rd of April RD 7 weeks before the living room spreadsheet ambush. What's that, honey? Grandma asked, setting down a mug of tea beside my textbooks. My fingers trembled as I lifted the form. My mother knew. She planned this. Grandma peered through her reading glasses, her lips thinning to a tight line. Oh, Sienna. Not pity in her voice, something harder. Anger. I traced the signature at the bottom. Melanie Rhodes. Not even a moment's hesitation in her pen strokes. She filled this out almost 2 months ago. My voice sounded strange, hollow, yet razor sharp. She knew they were getting rid of me while I was still washing the twins' dinner dishes. Grandma's knuckles whitened around her coffee mug. Let me see that. I passed it over, then sank into the worn leather sofa in the apartment above their garage. 3 days since my exile, and the space still felt temporary, like a motel room rather than home. From the kitchen, I heard Grandma's voice rise, sharp and clear. She thought I couldn't hear. How could you do this to your own daughter, Melanie? What kind of mother calculates her child's worth like a grocery bill? Silence as Mom responded. Then Grandma's voice again, steel beneath the southern drawl. No, you listen to me. That girl has done nothing but try to please you both, and you treat her like she's disposable? Another pause. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped against the windows. Don't you dare bring God into this. The Lord doesn't teach parents to abandon their children when a better option comes along. The conversation ended with the bang of the receiver against the cradle. I pretended to study my calculus homework when Grandma returned, her cheeks flushed with anger. Your mother sends her love, she said flatly. The laugh that escaped me sounded nothing like humor. I bet she does. The doorbell chimed downstairs. Minutes later, Aunt Danielle appeared at the top of the stairs, arms laden with grocery bags. Mom's younger sister looked nothing like her dark hair, where Mom's was blonde, warm brown eyes instead of cool blue. I brought provisions, she announced, dropping the bags on the counter. Grandma says you like those chocolate peanut butter things. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Danielle unpacked groceries with quick, efficient movements. Besides, someone should be thinking about what you need. The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. Have you talked to Mom? I asked, hating the hopeful note in my voice. Danielle's hands stilled on a carton of orange juice. Yes, it didn't go well. What did she say? She sighed, leaning against the counter. Nothing that makes any sense. Something about financial priorities and what's best for everyone. Best for everyone except me. That's exactly what I told her. Danielle's eyes flashed. I asked her what happens when the twins get expensive hobbies or need braces. Will they get spreadsheet meetings too? My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. My heart lurched traitorously until I read the words. We've decided it's best if you don't come back for a while. The twins are confused. No, I love you. No, I'm sorry. Just another clean excision. I need my chemistry textbook, I said, my voice tight. And my winter coat. It's still in my closet. Danielle nodded. I'll drive you over tomorrow after school. But tomorrow came with another text, this one from Brian. Melanie's not comfortable with you coming by. I'll put your remaining items in a box on the porch. Danielle read the message over my shoulder in the school parking lot, her face darkening. He can't be serious. It's fine, I said automatically, though nothing about this was fine. I need to stop at the Waffle House anyway. I have an interview. Her eyebrows shot up. An interview? Sienna, you don't need to. Yes, I do. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. I need my own money. The interview lasted 10 minutes the next day. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Vera with bottle-red hair, glanced at my straight-A transcript and perfect attendance record. When can you start? Tomorrow, after school. 5 to 11 shift, okay? I calculated quickly. Home by 11:30, homework until 2 a.m., up at 6:30 for school. Perfect. That night, I sat on my bed counting the money in my wallet. $27.14. Not enough for the used graphing calculator I needed for calculus. Not enough for next month's bus pass. Definitely not enough for the prom ticket Melissa kept mentioning. A knock at my door. Grandpa Ray entered, his tall frame stooped slightly at the shoulders. He held out an envelope. This was supposed to be for your graduation, but plans changed. Inside was $300 in crisp 20s. Grandpa, I can't. You can and you will. His voice brooked no argument. Your grandmother and I discussed it. We're not rich, but we're not letting you struggle alone. The kindness nearly broke me where cruelty had not. Later, alone in bed, my phone lit up with a college brochure email. Austin Peay State University, full of smiling students who probably had parents who wanted them. I typed a careful text to Mom. Need your help with student loan forms. College applications due soon. The phone remained silent for 6 hours. I kept it beside me through dinner, through homework, through my shower. At 11:23 p.m., it finally buzzed. Sorry, we're focused on the twins' future. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor as I slid down the wall. For the first time since the spreadsheet meeting, hot tears spilled down my cheeks, silent at first, then building to ugly, ragged sobs that tore through my chest. I'd been replaced, erased, written out of the family ledger with the stroke of a pen, and now they wouldn't even help me build a future of my own. At that moment, curled on the floor of my grandparents' garage apartment, I made a promise to myself. I would never again depend on people who saw me as a line item that could be cut from their budget. I would become someone no one could afford to lose. Next day, Aunt Danielle's pen hovered over the student loan paperwork. Her reading glasses slid down her nose as she studied the fine print. You shouldn't have to do this alone, she said, signing her name with a flourish before I could object. The co-signature felt like oxygen after drowning for weeks. 24 hours had passed between my text to Mom and her gut-punch reply, sorry, we're focused on the twins' future. I'd crumpled to the kitchen floor that night, finally allowing the tears I'd held back since walking out of my childhood home with duffel bags over my shoulders. Now, 4 months later, I stood in the smallest dorm room at Austin Peay State University, hanging up my 3 work uniforms. Campus job from 8 to noon, medical office cleaning from 5 to 9. Weekend DoorDash deliveries squeezed between study sessions. The military-style schedule left exactly 4 hours for sleep. You're gonna wear yourself into nothing, my roommate Sarah commented, watching me organize my desk with textbooks borrowed from the library. Better than owing something to people who threw me away. My alarm blared at 5 a.m. By 5:15, I trudged across campus with yesterday's coffee reheated in a thermos. The supply chain management professor, Dr. Torres, noticed me the first week. Miss Rhodes, you look exhausted. He leaned against his desk after class. You understand the material better than students who sleep 8 hours. Sleep's a luxury, Professor. So is talent. He slid a paper across his desk. Internship opportunity. Normally for seniors, but I'm recommending you. The paper trembled in my hands. Why me? Because anyone who works 3 jobs while maintaining a 3.9 GPA understands what management actually means. A week later, I got the internship. Beat out students whose parents paid their rent, bought their textbooks, called professors to complain about grades. Students who'd never learned the brutal mathematics of survival. That's how 2 years passed. One Tuesday morning during my second year, I walked into Kroger for ramen and peanut butter, the cheapest calories per dollar. I rounded the cereal aisle and stopped cold. Mom stood there, arranging boxes on the shelf in her blue employee vest. The twins fidgeted beside her. Neither recognized me. My heart hammered against my ribs. 2 years of distance shrank to nothing in an instant. She looked up, her face frozen in shock. Sienna. The twins glanced between us, confused. Caleb had grown tall, his speech impediment apparently corrected. Lena's hair hung in the same style Mom had always done mine. "Who's that?" Lena asked, tugging at Mom's sleeve. Mom's fingers tightened around a box of Cheerios. "This is someone I used to know." The dismissal burned like acid. 2 years of working until my hands bled, of falling asleep over textbooks, of stretching $20 across a week of meals, reduced to someone I used to know. A calm settled over me, surprising in its clarity. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm your daughter, the one you decided wasn't worth keeping." Other customers turned. A woman with a shopping cart paused, eyebrows raised. Mom's face flushed crimson. "Sienna, please," she whispered. "Not here." "Where then?" "My dorm room where I sleep 4 hours a night, the medical office I clean toilets in, the restaurant where I bus tables until midnight." The twins stared, wide-eyed. Recognition dawned on Caleb's face. Stories they must have heard, lies they'd been told. "You left us," he said, uncertain. "Is that what they told you?" I looked directly at Mom. "Did you show them the spreadsheet where you calculated me out of the family budget?" Mom grabbed the twins' hands. "We need to go." I stepped aside, suddenly aware of the store manager approaching. "Don't worry, I'm leaving." That night I sat on my dorm bed, shaking. Not from sadness, but from a strange, electric power. I'd spoken the truth aloud for the first time, named the betrayal for what it was. At graduation 2 years later, Grandpa Ray and Aunt Danielle cheered so loudly when they called my name that I blushed walking across the stage. My supply chain management degree, earned with honors, felt heavier than its paperweight. Mom and Brian sent nothing, not a card, not a text. Their absence is now a familiar shape in my life. I attacked my career with the same methodical intensity I'd applied to my education. Each promotion a strategic step, each performance review a chance to secure my independence. By 31, the call came from headquarters. "Regional Operations Director," my boss announced. "Starting salary $122. More than Brian had ever made. That weekend at Grandpa Ray's barbecue, Aunt Danielle couldn't contain herself. "Sienna just got promoted again," she announced, passing potato salad to Cousin Jeff. "Regional Director now." A distant cousin raised her eyebrows. I didn't know Melanie's daughter was doing so well. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a text from a number I'd deleted but never forgotten. "It's been a long time. We should catch up." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. The calculation was simple. 14 years of silence, broken only when news of my success reached her ears. Some equations solved themselves. On Sunday, the doorbell chimed through my quiet afternoon like an unwelcome alarm. I set down my coffee mug and padded across the hardwood floors of my Brentwood apartment, expecting the neighbor's kids selling fundraiser cookies again. Instead, my mother and Brian stood on my welcome mat like apparitions from another lifetime. "Sienna." Mom's voice wavered, her eyes traveling from my face to the interior of my home. "You look well." Brian didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped past me, his broad shoulders brushing against mine as he entered my living room. His eyes swept over my furnishings, the leather sectional, the abstract art on the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the hills. "Nice place," he said, hands in his pockets as he appraised my life. "Very nice." I remained by the open door, one hand on the knob. "What are you doing here?" Mom hovered at the threshold, clutching her purse with white knuckles before following Brian inside. "We've been trying to reach you," she said, though my phone had never rang with their number. "How did you find my address?" I asked, closing the door despite every instinct screaming to leave it open. "Your Aunt Danielle mentioned your promotion at the family barbecue." Brian lowered himself onto my couch without asking. "Regional Operations Director. Impressive." The cushions sagged beneath him, just as our family had beneath his financial calculations 17 years ago. "You've done well for yourself," Mom added, perching on the edge of an armchair, her back rigid. She'd aged deeper lines around her mouth, silver threading through her once honey-colored hair. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, a size smaller than she used to wear. I remained standing. What do you want? A look passed between them, the same silent communication I'd witnessed the day they'd informed me I was no longer affordable. Brian cleared his throat. The twins are starting college next fall, he said, settling deeper into my couch. Tennessee State for Lena, Belmont for Caleb. Congratulations. The word tasted like copper pennies. Education costs have risen considerably, Brian continued, his tone shifting to the familiar spreadsheet voice. We thought now that you're established you could help. The request hung in the air, stunning in its audacity. Help, I repeated. Mom nodded, leaning forward. I raised you for 13 years, Sienna. Don't act like you owe us nothing. Blood rushed to my face, hot and pulsing. 13 years. Then you calculated me out of your budget when I became inconvenient. That's not fair, Mom protested, through her eyes dropping to her lap. We did what we had to do. For the twins, I finished for her. Yes, Brian said, unapologetic. And now they need your help. That's what family does. I almost laughed. Family doesn't discard people like trash, then show up when they smell money. Brian's face hardened. You're being dramatic. We provided for you. My grandparents provided for me. Aunt Danielle provided for me. My voice remained steady even as my hands trembled. I provided for myself, working triple shifts to put myself through college while you were taking the twins to Disney World. Mom's eyes widened. How did you... Facebook exists, Mom. So do cousins who talk. Brian stood, his height meant to intimidate. Listen, we're not asking for charity. This is about family obligations, Christian duty. Christian duty, I echoed, moving toward the door. I believe I've fulfilled mine by not having you arrested for child abandonment. I'm asking you to leave. Brian's face flushed crimson. We have a right to be heard. No, you don't. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Not in my home. What are you doing? Mom asked, suddenly alert. Calling the police. I pressed the numbers deliberately, watching their faces. You wouldn't, Brian challenged. I held his gaze as the dispatcher answered. This is Sienna Rhodes at 842 Crestview Lane. I have 2 unwelcome visitors refusing to leave my property. Brian lunged for the phone. I stepped back, continuing my conversation with the dispatcher. Mom began to cry those familiar tears that had never fallen when she'd sent me away with duffel bags and no goodbye. Officers are on their way, I said after ending the call. You have about 4 minutes to leave voluntarily. You'd call the police on your own mother? Mom's voice broke. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had braided my hair and bandaged my knees, who had also packed away my childhood photos to make room for the twins' larger frames. My mother left me when I was 17, I said quietly. You're just someone who shares my DNA. Blue lights flashed through my windows 6 minutes later as the officers escorted Brian and Melanie from my property. Brian argued jurisdiction and property rights while Mom wept into her hands. The female officer took my statement with professional efficiency, her eyes occasionally flicking to the family photos on my mantel, none of which included Brian or Melanie. As the patrol car pulled away, I closed my door and engaged the deadbolt. Tomorrow I would visit the Williamson County Court to file for a restraining order, to make official what I had known for 17 years. These people were not my family. Family doesn't calculate your worth on a spreadsheet. A week later, the phone vibrated against the glass coffee table. Unknown number. Sienna almost declined it, another sales pitch about extended warranties or timeshares. Her thumb hovered over the red button when curiosity nudged her. She answered without speaking. Hello? Is this Sienna Rhodes? A young man's voice. Unfamiliar, yet something in the timbre struck a forgotten chord. Who's asking? Her words came out clipped, professional. This is Caleb. The name hung in the silence. Caleb Andrews, your half-brother. Sienna's hand tightened around the phone. The living room suddenly felt airless. If this is some kind of setup from Melanie? It's not, I swear. His voice cracked slightly. She doesn't know I'm calling. Neither does Brian. Sienna moved to her window, peering down at the street below as if expecting to see them lurking near the crepe myrtle trees lining her driveway. How did you get my number? Aunt Danielle. She didn't want to give it to me at first. A nervous laugh. I had to convince her I wasn't a spy. Sienna closed her eyes. She could picture Danielle's skeptical expression, arms crossed, questioning this young man she barely remembered as a toddler. "Prove you're Caleb," Sienna demanded. "What?" "Tell me something only my half-brother would know." The pause stretched long enough that Sienna nearly hung up. "You used to read to us," he finally said. "When I was 4, right before you left. You did different voices for the characters in that book about the purple crayon. And you let me hold a flashlight under the blanket when Mom and Brian thought we were asleep." The memory hit like a physical blow. Harold and the purple crayon. The twins snuggled on either side of her, small and warm, unaware of the adult calculations happening in the other room. "Why are you calling me after all this time?" Her voice steadied. 14 years of silence deserved an explanation. "I found some old papers in the attic. Financial stuff." Caleb's voice hardened. "They calculated you out, Sienna, like you were just another bill they could cancel." Something cold slid down her spine. Hearing it stated so plainly by someone else made it real in a way her own memories couldn't. "I know what they did," she said. "They told us you left because you didn't want a family." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "That you chose college over us. I never quite believed it, but I was just a kid." Sienna sank into her armchair, throat tight. "And now?" "Now I'm 18 and furious." A drawer slammed in the background. "They've been lying to us our whole lives." Sienna stared at the framed photo on her bookshelf, Grandpa Ray and Aunt Danielle at her college graduation, beaming with pride. "Did you tell Lena?" she asked. "Yeah, she was angry at first. Not at you them, then curious. We've been looking you up online. Your LinkedIn profile. That article when you became Regional Operations Director." Her professional mask, curated and perfect. Nothing there revealed the girl who walked 2 miles with duffel bags, who slept 4 hours a night between jobs and classes. "I'd like to meet you," Caleb said into her silence. "If you want. I understand if you don't." Sienna's knuckles whitened around the phone. The careful barriers she'd built, the safe distance from anything connected to Melanie and Brian meeting Caleb, would pierce them all. "When?" The word escaped before she could reconsider. "Anytime. I have a car now, I can come to you." They arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between their homes. Neutral territory. 3 days later, Sienna arrived 20 minutes early, claiming a corner table with her back to the wall, an escape route mapped. The bell above the door jingled, and she knew immediately. The same cowlick at the crown that she shared with her biological father. Eyes more green than her hazel, but with identical flecks of gold. He scanned the room, spotted her, and froze. For one breath, Sienna saw herself at 17 alone, discarded, terrified of what came next. Then Caleb smiled, bright and genuine, and walked toward her table with his hands shoved in his pockets. "Hi," he said, pulling out the chair opposite her. "I've been waiting 14 years to know my sister." A month later, the aroma of rosemary chicken filled Sienna's apartment as she arranged the centerpiece of fresh wildflowers on her oak dining table. Through the kitchen window, Nashville's evening skyline sparkled against the darkening sky. She checked her watch 10 minutes until everyone arrived. Sienna smoothed the linen tablecloth, fingers lingering on the hand-stitched border her grandmother had taught her to make during those first lonely months after her parents had calculated her out of their lives. The memory no longer cut as deeply as it once had. The doorbell chimed and Sienna straightened, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Grandpa Ray stood in the hallway, leaning on a polished maple cane, his weathered face crinkling into a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "There she is," he said, voice rough with age but warm with pride. "The smartest Rhodes who ever lived." Sienna wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the familiar scent of Old Spice and mint gum. "Flattery will get you extra dessert, old man." "Then I'll keep it coming," he chuckled, stepping inside with careful movements. Her grandmother followed, carrying a ceramic dish covered with aluminum foil. "Sweet potato casserole," she announced. "The kind with the pecans you used to pick straight off the plate when you thought I wasn't looking." "I never fooled you for a second, did I?" Sienna took the dish, warmth spreading through her chest. "Not once." Her grandmother patted her cheek. "You were always terrible at being sneaky." Aunt Danielle arrived next, her silver-streaked hair twisted into an elegant knot. She handed Sienna a bottle of wine and squeezed her hand. "The apartment looks beautiful. Who knew the regional operations director had such a flair for interior design?" "I had a good teacher," Sienna replied, nodding toward her grandmother. The doorbell rang again. Sienna's heart quickened as she opened the door to find Caleb standing there, hands in his pockets, looking so much like their mother that for a split second, time seemed to fold back on itself. "Hey sis," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in that crooked smile they somehow shared despite different fathers. Behind him stood Lena, clutching a small gift bag, her eyes darting nervously around the apartment. "I brought something," she said, thrusting the bag forward. "It's nothing fancy." Sienna accepted it with both hands. "Thank you for coming." The twins stepped inside, and Sienna closed the door on the world that had once pushed her out. Dinner unfolded in waves of conversation and laughter. Sienna watched Caleb describe his engineering classes with animated hands while Grandpa Ray nodded approvingly. Lena, initially quiet, gradually joined in, her shoulders relaxing as the evening progressed. "Remember when Sienna built that tree fort?" Grandpa Ray asked, pointing his fork toward Danielle. "Used my power tools without permission." "It stood for 3 summers," Sienna protested. "Until that thunderstorm knocked half the tree down," her grandmother added. "You cried for days." "I did not," Sienna laughed, though she had. After the plates were cleared and coffee served, Sienna retrieved an envelope from her desk drawer. She placed it in front of Aunt Danielle. "What's this?" Danielle asked, fingers hesitating over the sealed edge. "Open it," Sienna urged, perching on the arm of the sofa. Danielle slid her finger under the flap and pulled out the reservation confirmation. Her eyes widened. "Grand Canyon Lodge? For 4 days? Sienna, this is too much." "That's exactly why you deserve it," Sienna replied, her voice steady despite the lump forming in her throat. "You showed up when you didn't have to." Danielle reached for Sienna's hand, her eyes glistening. "You never needed to earn my love, honey." The conversation turned to Melanie and Brian, their names spoken without the sharp edge of pain they once carried. "They called again," Caleb said, staring into his coffee cup. "Asked if I'd talk to you about helping with Lena's tuition." "What did you tell them?" Sienna asked, watching her half-sister's face carefully. "That I earned my own way through college," Lena answered, meeting Sienna's gaze. "Just like you did." Grandpa Ray raised his coffee mug. "To the family that chooses to stay." 6 mugs clinked together, the sound ringing clear in the warm light of Sienna's chosen home. Later, standing on her balcony, Sienna felt Danielle join her, their shoulders touching lightly as they looked over the city. "You did good, kid," Danielle said softly. "Built something beautiful from broken pieces." Sienna's phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Thanks for letting us be part of your life." She smiled, typing back. "Family isn't about obligation, it's about choice."